Hello, everyone. Tonight we are stepping into something delicate and dangerous. Imagine this: a room glowing with soft light, laughter bouncing off the walls, forks clinking gently against porcelain. It's warm, familiar, family all around, everyone dressed up, smiling, stories being told for the 100th time. But me, I'm standing in the corner, plate in hand, trying to disappear into the wallpaper, because I feel it. There's something under the surface, tension, and then he stands. His voice cuts through the room like a sudden chill. He says my name, then 5 words that unravel everything I've built. In an instant, it's like every sound vanishes. Chairs stop creaking. Breaths are held. Eyes lock on me. And there I am, exposed. No warning, no mercy. But hold on. We'll get there. We'll unpack it together. Because this isn't just about a secret. It's about trust. About betrayal. About what you do when the life you've carefully protected is suddenly held up for display. Before we dive deeper, can I ask something small? If stories like this resonate with you, if you feel something stirring inside you right now, take a moment to like the video. And subscribe. But only if you really like what I do here. No pressure, just honesty. Also, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, what time it is. Because even though I'm just a voice on a screen, we're sharing this moment together. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan to have some soft background music. And let's start our journey tonight. I was 19 when it happened. That's when the secret began. The kind that doesn't just hide in a locked drawer, but buries itself inside you, changing how you walk, how you laugh, how close you let people get. Back then, I was young enough to believe that silence was safer than truth. That if I just kept moving forward, no one would ever need to know what I was carrying. I remember the moment vividly. A hospital hallway, cold, sterile. That humming fluorescent light above me, buzzing like it knew what I was about to do. I signed a paper, didn't cry, didn't flinch. Just shut something off inside. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it broke something in me that never quite healed. Years passed. I moved cities, changed jobs, became someone else. And it worked. For a while. I laughed louder. I said yes to invitations. I got really good at hiding in plain sight. Only one person knew. Only one. And I chose him. Because I thought he was safe. Because I believed he understood what silence meant. He listened when I told him. He held my hand. He swore it would never leave the room. I believed him. Of course I did. That was before I knew that even the kindest promises can crack under pressure. But at the time, it felt like relief. Like maybe, finally, I wasn't alone in it anymore. I didn't expect him to carry it. I just needed him to never throw it back at me, never use it, never weaponize it. Now, sitting here, remembering how much trust I placed in that moment, how fragile it all was, I can't help but ask myself, what changed? It was Matthew. The one person who knew. The one person I told. I didn't plan to tell anyone. But one night, I cracked. We were sitting on his apartment balcony, feet up on the metal railing, city lights blinking in the distance, like tiny stars that forgot their place. He handed me a glass of wine, asked how I was doing. Really doing, and I told him. Not all at once, not cleanly, but in pieces. The hallway, the paper, the decision. The silence that followed. His face didn't change. No judgment, no pity, just stillness. Then he reached over, wrapped his hand over mine, and said, "You never have to explain that to anyone else, ever again." I felt something in me relax, like a knot coming undone after years of tension. He was the only one I trusted with it. The only one I chose to trust. So when he spoke up, when he stood in that room and peeled back the curtain on my most fragile truth, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. He chose that moment, that place, those people. There were 100 other ways he could have handled it. A private conversation, a warning, a note. But instead, he looked around, waited until everyone was watching, and then detonated the bomb. Why? That's the question that echoed louder than the secret itself. Why would he do that? Why now? Why me? I kept playing back our last few conversations. Had I missed something? Had I pushed too hard, said too much, not said enough? The truth was, we'd grown distant. The kind of distance that doesn't happen overnight. A slow fade. Texts left unanswered, plans canceled, energy dimming. But betrayal? No, I never expected that. Not from him. That night, after everyone had gone, after the room had emptied and the silence set in, I sat alone on the edge of my bed and whispered to myself, he knew. And he still did it. The week before it happened, everything had felt just a little off. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to tug at the edge of my comfort. Matthew had been quieter than usual. Not cold, just distant. Like he was always somewhere else in his mind, even when we were in the same room. We met for coffee on Wednesday. Same place as always, same table near the window. He smiled, asked how work was, laughed at something I said. But his eyes kept drifting. To the door. To the street. To anything that wasn't me. I remember reaching for my cup and catching his hand pulling away, as if he didn't mean to flinch, but couldn't stop himself in time. There was a flicker of guilt there. I saw it. It passed quickly, but not quick enough to hide. Then Friday came. The family dinner. A gathering that felt more like an obligation than a celebration. We hadn't all been in one place for years. Old grudges still floated under the surface, masked by polite smiles and overly sweet desserts. But I showed up. Put on the dress I always felt good in. Brought wine. Even brought Matthew. He said he wanted to come. Said he wanted to support me. That word, support, it makes me flinch now. Because it's what he said right before everything fell apart. As the night went on, I noticed how he kept pulling people aside, whispering, laughing softly in corners. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid, that I had to stop reading into every little thing. But then Aunt Grace looked at me with this strange mix of concern and curiosity. And Uncle Dean didn't even make his usual joke when I passed him the mashed potatoes. Something was happening. I just didn't know what. Yet, if I had trusted my instincts, if I had pulled him aside right then and asked, "What are you doing?" maybe things would have gone differently. But I didn't. I smiled through the unease, laughed at the stories, filled glasses, played the part. And all the while, my secret sat beneath the table, ticking. The moment it happened, I still hear it in my sleep. We were standing for dessert. Someone had just lit the candles on a cake, and the lights were dimmed for effect. Laughter, phones raised for pictures, music low in the background. It felt normal, safe. Matthew clinked his spoon against a glass. 3 soft taps. That sound that says, "Everyone look here." The room quieted. Smiles turned toward him. And me? I smiled too. Because I thought he was going to toast something sweet, something simple. But he cleared his throat and said my name. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he said. A few nervous laughs followed. Someone said, "What's this about?" But he didn't flinch. His eyes, they locked on mine. Not with malice, not with kindness, just finality. "She's been hiding something for years," he said, "and I think everyone here deserves to know." My heart dropped. A glass clinked against the table. No one moved. I whispered, "Matthew, don't." But he didn't stop. In just a few sentences, he spilled it all. Every detail I had ever trusted him with. The hospital, the decision, the silence. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stood there, rooted to the floor, my skin burning, my ears ringing, my breath caught somewhere in my chest. People were staring, some wide-eyed, some glancing away, like witnessing something too intimate to process. No one said a word, not even the ones who loved me. And in that thick, heavy silence, I realized something. No matter how well you build your life, No matter how carefully you hide the cracks, all it takes is one person, one moment, one sentence, to make the whole thing collapse. I walked out without looking back, left my coat, left the cake, left the parts of me I knew would never be the same again. Outside, the air hit my face like a slap. Cold, unforgiving. But at least it was real. I used to think that silence hurt the most, that hiding a truth made you feel isolated, like you were screaming underwater. But nothing compares to watching people's faces change in real time when they hear your secret out loud. They don't just react, they recalculate you. They tilt their heads, furrow their brows, scan you like you're someone new, someone they're not sure how to treat anymore. That night, I saw it in every face in the room. My Aunt Grace clutched her pearls like someone had shouted profanity at the dinner table. My cousin Janine looked confused, like she was still putting the pieces together. But the one that stung most was my sister, Eva. She didn't say anything. She didn't look away. She just stared, straight through me, like she was trying to find the version of me she thought she knew, and couldn't. We were close once, raised in the same bedroom, sharing secrets in the dark under the covers, building forts and swearing oaths of sisterhood that would last forever. But forever isn't immune to shock, to disappointment, to judgment. She didn't come after me when I left, didn't text, didn't call. And that silence hurt even more than Matthew's betrayal, because I expected more from her, from family. When I got home that night, I peeled off my shoes like they were made of lead, my feet numb, my heart heavier. I sat on the floor in my kitchen, back against the fridge, and just stared at nothing. Replay after replay after replay, every word, every glance, every breath in that cursed silence after he said what he said. It's strange how something you've carried for years, something you've made peace with privately, can feel so violating when it's exposed in front of people who never earned the right to know. I thought maybe Eva would text by morning. Maybe someone else would reach out. Say something. Anything. But the phone stayed quiet. Except for Matthew. He texted once. "We should talk." I stared at the screen, felt my thumb hover over the keyboard, and then I turned off my phone. Some things, some betrayals, don't get a reply. The morning after felt hollow. The kind of quiet that doesn't come with peace, but with absence, like something had been ripped out of the air and left everything unbalanced. I woke up still dressed, my makeup smudged, a dull ache pulsing behind my eyes. The sun was too bright, the world too normal. How could everything outside look the same when everything inside me had shifted? I checked my phone. No missed calls, no text, just Matthew's message from last night still sitting there like a landmine. We should talk. No apology, no explanation, just an invitation to walk back into the fire. I deleted it, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much. Then I opened social media, something I should have known better than to do. And there it was. A photo someone had posted at the party, just a casual group shot, people smiling. Me, in the background, frozen, face pale, eyes wide, caught in the moment right before everything changed. The comments were light, unaware, but I felt exposed, like I was being watched through a one-way mirror. I shut it all down, every application, every table. And then, I just sat. I didn't know what to do, where to go, how to even begin cleaning up the mess someone else made with my story. But before I could spiral too far, the doorbell rang. I froze, heart racing. It couldn't be Matthew. Could it? I moved slowly, peeking through the peephole. It wasn't him, it was my neighbor, Clara. She held out a bag of muffins and smiled awkwardly. "I thought you might want some breakfast," I blinked. Managed a thank you. She didn't push, didn't ask, just placed the bag in my hands and walked away. And that small gesture, it cracked something open in me. Not because it fixed anything, but because, for the first time in hours, someone offered kindness without wanting to know. No curiosity, no judgment, just care. And in that moment, with warm blueberry muffins pressed to my chest, I realized something. I couldn't undo what had happened. But maybe, just maybe, I could decide what happened next. By the third day, the silence from everyone else felt permanent. Almost like they'd rehearsed it. Like they agreed, without speaking, to let me vanish quietly. No texts, no check-ins, not even Eva. But Matthew, he kept trying. A second message, then a third, then a voicemail. Please, let's talk. I didn't mean for it to go that way. That line kept playing in my head. I didn't mean for it to go that way. But he did mean to say it, in front of everyone. At a moment, I couldn't defend myself. That wasn't accidental. That was strategy. Still, I needed answers. So I asked him to meet, not at my place, not his. Somewhere neutral, public, safe. We sat on opposite ends of a bench in the corner of a quiet park, the kind with empty swing sets and cracked pavement. He looked tired, eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept since the dinner. I didn't say anything, just waited. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and finally said, I panicked. I blinked. What does that even mean? He looked away. I was cornered. Your sister pulled me aside earlier that night, said she knew something was up with you, asked me directly, and I didn't know how to lie. I stared at him. You promised. You didn't just let it slip, Matthew. You stood up. You made an announcement. He swallowed hard. I thought maybe if it came from me, if I framed it gently, they'd understand. I didn't think it would explode like that. Gently? There was nothing gentle about what he did, but then he said something I wasn't prepared for. I thought I was protecting you. I laughed, quiet and bitter. By exposing me? I saw how tired you were, he whispered, how much effort it took to keep carrying it. I thought, maybe if they knew, you'd finally be free. That's when it hit me. He hadn't done it out of cruelty, not entirely. He did it out of control, out of his discomfort, his need for resolution, his idea of what I needed. But he never asked me, never gave me a choice. And that was the betrayal. Not just the words he spoke, but the decision to take my voice away when it mattered most. I stood, looked down at him, and said quietly, You don't get to choose what sets me free. Then I walked away. The days that followed were eerily still. You think heartbreak is loud? A door slamming, a shout, a tearful apology echoing down a hallway. But sometimes it's just silence, utter silence. No calls, no texts, just empty space where connection used to be. Even Eva stayed quiet. And that stung the most. Because I wasn't angry at her, not really. I just wanted her to ask, not to judge, not to console, just to ask. Instead, she said nothing, which somehow said everything. I kept going through the motions, answering emails, doing laundry, pretending the air didn't feel thicker than usual. But something inside me had shifted, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, but something, instinct maybe, made me swipe up. Hey, it's Nora, my old roommate. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She continued, I heard about what happened. Through Janine. Don't ask me how, just, it made its way to me. I waited for the judgment, the polite awkwardness, but instead, her voice softened. I just wanted to say, I get it, more than you know, and if you ever want to talk, or scream, or say nothing at all, I'm here. That one message? It cracked open something warm in my chest, because when everyone else went silent, she stepped in. No agenda, no expectations, just a hand reaching out in the dark. It reminded me, not everyone needs your full story to stand beside you. I sat on my couch for a long while after we hung up, mug in hand, letting the words settle. And then I made a decision. If anyone was going to speak my truth, it was going to be me, on my own terms, in my own voice, because I was tired of feeling like a secret in my own life. Tired of apologizing for surviving something I never should have gone through alone. No more hiding, no more shrinking. I would speak, not for them, but for me. I sat in front of my laptop for nearly 2 hours. Blank document, blinking cursor, hands frozen. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what to say. And saying it out loud, even through written words, meant I couldn't hide behind silence anymore. This wasn't for sympathy, wasn't a performance. I wasn't writing for anyone else's understanding. This was for me. A declaration. A line drawn in the sand between who I had been and who I was choosing to become. I started with the truth. The kind I used to whisper in the dark or pretend didn't need saying. I wrote about the hallway, the paper, the sterile silence of the nurse who wouldn't meet my eyes. I wrote about the guilt I carried, not from the act itself, but from the loneliness that followed. How the world taught me to keep it tucked away like something shameful instead of something human. I wrote about how I spent years building a life around the absence of that truth. Choosing words carefully, dodging certain questions, smiling through moments that felt like landmines. And then I wrote about Matthew. Not to crucify him, but to name what happened. Because silence protects the wrong people, and I was done doing that. When I finished, I sat back, breathed, read it once, then again. I didn't share it on social media, not yet. Instead, I printed it, folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope. I handwrote 3 names on 3 envelopes. Eva, my mother, and my Aunt Grace. These were the people whose silence hurt most, people whose voices I missed. Then I dropped the letters in the mail. No text, no heads up. Just words, carried by paper, delivered on my terms. It was terrifying, but also freeing. Because for the first time, I was the one revealing the truth. Not Matthew, not whispers, me. And with that, the shame began to shrink. Not disappear, but loosen its grip. Telling the truth didn't fix everything, but it did something better. It gave me back my voice. The first response came 2 days later. A text. Simple. From Eva. I read it. Can we talk? My chest tightened. I stared at the message like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I waited a full hour before replying. Not out of anger, but caution. I couldn't walk into another conversation where I wasn't allowed to finish a sentence. We met at a quiet cafe we used to go to as kids. The kind with chipped mugs and too much cinnamon in the chai. She was already seated when I arrived. No makeup, hair tied back. She looked tired, but not defensive. For a long time we just sat. No rush, no forced words. Then, softly, I didn't know, she said. I nodded. I didn't want you to. She looked at me, eyes brimming. But I wish I had. That broke me, because under the betrayal, under the silence, was always that hope that if someone had known, maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone. I froze, she said, when Matthew said it. I was so shocked, and then I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. And that's worse, isn't it? I didn't answer, because it wasn't about ranking wrongs. It was about how we moved forward. I shared more. Not everything, but enough. The weight I'd carried, the fear, the decision made in a sterile room because there were no better choices. She cried quietly, not for pity, but because she finally saw me. And I cried too, not because I was broken, but because someone was finally reaching across the silence with both hands open. She didn't offer solutions, didn't try to frame it with silver linings. She just listened, fully. By the end of that coffee, something between us had shifted, not restored completely, but realigned. And then came the next message, from Aunt Grace. I owe you an apology. I'm ashamed I looked away. You are braver than all of us combined. One by one, the letters reached their homes, and one by one, responses arrived. Some with warmth, some with confusion, some with the beginning of grace. But the most important thing? They heard it from me. And that changed everything. Not everyone forgave me. Not everyone understood. And honestly, I stopped expecting them to. Because the truth is, when you tell your story, you risk breaking the image people built of you. The one they liked. The one that never made them uncomfortable. For some, that's too much to accept. I got a message from my cousin Janine. A long paragraph. Mostly polite. But somewhere in there, a sentence that struck deep. I just wish you'd made different choices. I stared at it. That sentence said everything. She didn't ask what led me there. She didn't ask how I survived. Just a quiet disapproval wrapped in civility. And that's when I realized, some people don't want the truth. They want comfort, even if it comes at your expense. So I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed her understanding to validate what I had lived through. But others surprised me. My mother, whose silence had been deafening for years. She called, voice trembling, words unsure. I didn't know, she said. I should have, but I didn't, and I'm sorry for not asking sooner. We cried, not because things could be undone, but because something new had opened, something honest. It wasn't smooth. There were still pauses, still awkward gaps where we tiptoed around pain. But for once, we weren't pretending. That was more healing than any apology. Others stayed distant. Matthew, for instance. He didn't message again. I think he understood. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he thought what he did was mercy. But it wasn't his forgiveness to ask for. And it wasn't mine to give freely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the real change? It was in me. Because I stopped shrinking. Stopped softening my edges just to keep the room comfortable. I stopped performing the version of myself they'd all grown used to. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of real peace. Not the kind that asks you to smile through pain, but the kind that comes when you tell the truth and survive it. Something shifted in me, quietly at first. It wasn't dramatic, no grand declarations, no viral posts, just a new rhythm. A new way of moving through the world without flinching at my own shadow. I started writing more, journaling, story fragments, pieces of memory that I used to bury under routine. It helped, not just to process, but to rebuild. Then, one day, I got an invitation. Nora, my old roommate, had shared a bit of my letter with a small community group she volunteered with. People who had been through hard decisions. People who were still carrying stories in silence. She called me. They'd love to hear from you. No pressure, just, if you ever feel ready. I wasn't ready, but I went anyway. It was a library basement, 10 folding chairs, a water cooler humming in the corner. No stage, no spotlight. I stood up, hands shaking, voice small. And I told my story. Not with perfect words, not with polished lines. But with truth, and breath, and pauses that didn't ask to be filled. When I finished, no one clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment. Instead, someone whispered, "Thank you for saying what I've never said out loud." And suddenly, I wasn't alone. That night, I cried in my car. But it wasn't grief, it wasn't rage. It was something quieter, something softer, like permission, to exist, fully. Without hiding, more invitations came, small events, workshops, anonymous forums. I never gave advice, just stories. Because sometimes, hearing you're not the only one is the most powerful thing of all. I turned pain into something useful. Not because I had to, but because I could. Because surviving isn't just about enduring. It's about choosing what comes next. Even after the fire. Even after the silence. Especially then. It was late spring when I saw him again. Matthew, not planned, not invited. Just there. At a mutual friend's fundraiser. He stood across the room, near the wine table, looking awkward, older somehow. I felt my breath hitch. But only for a moment. Then I straightened, stepped forward, and met his eyes. He looked stunned. I could tell he didn't expect me to come over. But I had nothing left to fear, nothing to hide. "Hi," I said, quiet, calm, clear. He swallowed. Hi, you look different. I am different, I replied. He nodded, and for the first time since that night, he didn't try to justify, didn't fill the silence with empty apologies. He just stood there, still. I've played that night over 1,000 times, he said finally, and I keep wishing I'd kept my mouth shut. I didn't speak. I let the weight of those words hang there. I thought I was helping, he continued. I thought. You thought wrong, I said. Not cruel, just honest. He lowered his gaze. I know, and I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for deciding for you, for taking your voice. That one hit different, because he finally named it. Not the secret, not the story, the theft. The moment he made himself the narrator of a story that wasn't his to tell. Do you want forgiveness? I asked. He hesitated. I want you to have peace, even if it doesn't include me. That was the first unselfish thing I'd heard from him in a long time. I took a breath. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't trust you either, and I don't think I will again. He nodded. I understand. And I think he did, for the first time. We parted without drama, no closure speech, no handshake, just two people acknowledging the damage done and walking away in opposite directions. And for once, I didn't carry the weight with me. I left it there, with him. It's been a year, 12 months since my secret was dragged into the light, since the room went still, since eyes I loved turned away, and yet I'm still here. Not just breathing, but living. Fully. Some days I still feel the sting. There are moments, quiet ones, when I remember the faces, the silence, the tremble in my hands. But now, those memories no longer control me. They've become part of the architecture of who I am. Not ruins, but foundation. When Matthew revealed my secret, I thought it would destroy me. And maybe, in some ways, it did. But what it really did was clear the space for me to build something new, something honest, something mine. This story isn't about shame. It's about reclamation. It's about what happens when someone takes your voice, and you decide to take it back. I've learned that not everyone deserves your story. That trust, once broken, may never return. And that's okay. I've learned that silence can protect you, but only for so long. Eventually, what's hidden begins to weigh more than the truth ever could. And I've learned, perhaps most powerfully, that healing doesn't come when others understand you. It comes when you understand yourself. When you stand in front of the mirror, see every part of your past, and no longer flinch. To anyone listening now, carrying something heavy, something unspeakable, this story was for you. Not to tell you what to do, but to show you what's possible. That you are not your secret. You are not their reaction. You are not their silence. You are the author, and you can rewrite the ending. Thank you for staying with me through this journey, for every second you listened, every breath you shared across the distance. If this story meant something to you, if it stirred something real, I hope you'll like the video and subscribe for the next one. There are more stories coming, more truths to share, more quiet to turn into connection. So wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm grateful. Truly. Now, take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let the story fade. Let the night be gentle. And until next time, good night.